Today's guest is Aaron Toppston. He's the managing partner at GS Futures. So, Aaron, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. We were talking before. We haven't crossed paths, but we have people in common. How long have you been part of the industry?
Sure. I started in the construction industry through the lens actually of a insurance and surety related company called Aon. And that was in 2010 or 11, somewhere in that time frame. So a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and what sort of uh, with your interest in the area? Because I know, you come at it a little bit from a technology side, commercial real estate side, but it's not construction is not always the fastest moving area. What sort of is your interest in the area?
Totally. So just mentioned, my first foray into the industry was through the lens of service provider at Aon. And then I moved over to contractor and developer role at Walsh. And that's where the kind of bug bit me to say, like, what role does data and technology have into creating better project outcomes? Better project outcomes for an owner, better project outcomes for a builder, better project outcomes for a trade or even a supplier. And in this kind of intellectual curiosity around every project is the first and last time something gets built, the first and last time that team gets together. This for commercial construction, first and last time that that design is put together and it gets executed on that plot of land. And it's a really challenging environment for consistency. And we're really lucky we have an industry with some like heroes, right, that will projects across the line. And that I find amazing. If you can give those heroes one extra tool, seem to be something that is an underserved area. My skill set is I'm a finance professional, right? I'm an investor. So I thought, hey, as an investor with some experience in the industry, where can we marry up these two ideas in a successful way? And that's kind of how I ended up in the venture seat.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about willing projects across the line with all these different people. I mean, what are some of the habits that make that possible? Temperaments, people,
Sure.
things. Yeah.
First in, last out, I think is I know it's a term from supply chain management, but um, the folks that are there before your 6 a.m. and leave well after all the trades leave um, are the folks that really want to have a personal commitment to a project and a client. I think it's one of the hardest working industries there is, and I hats off to folks who make that happen. Um, and I think that's really important. And two is at the end of the day, construction and real estate operations are services industries, and they're professional services industries, and those operate on trust. If I'm an owner of a project, do I trust my builder to resolve problems? Do we have a box of let's talk about it versus a box of like let's just get it done? And I think building that trust is super important. So hard work and trust is kind of important to anything in life, but I think is really the anchor of our industry.
Yeah. It sounds like you're talking about, a builder that sort of just almost takes ownership of the thing and just has that owner's mentality.
Definitely. I mean, that goes a long way for anything, right? So, but I think it's particularly a trait that I admire in our industry.
Yeah. So you're talking about one tool or possibly a technology that's going to make a difference. What are some of those things in your mind that make a difference or is going to make a bigger difference going forward?
Totally. I think there's quite a few out there. I don't want to limit just to one. But I think a prior guest who introduced us to Aaron Kahn has the 10x better rule. And I think that 10x better rule is a really good one, right? And so I'll do a quick mention of a portfolio company of ours. We have a portfolio company called ClearStory, and ClearStory is 10x better on how do you manage change orders from a time and materials ticket at a trade to an invoice to the GC to the review process with an owner, transparency and consistency of execution, and eliminating the minutia of managing some of the routine parts. Is the tax amount right? Is the labor amount right? It seems small, but in when it's wrapped well and executed professionally with good user experience, it truly is 10x better. And so those are the examples of the type of portfolio companies that we're thrilled to support.
Yeah. So 10x better, just so that, it can overcome any sort of friction of doing nothing.
Totally. And look, um, if if you're building a software that targets field, then it has to be helping the person in the field. If you're targeting software that helps the CFO function, then it has to help the CFO function. I think that like clarity of consistency between who uses my platform, whether that's hardware or software, against who pays for it, who's signing the contract, it's really important. And I think some of the best firms are able to have good alignment between the contracting party and the using party, and making their users' life much better as a important part of the outcome.
Got it. Exactly. You mentioned, yeah. So basically, who's using it, who's paying for it, and I guess at some level, if the technology is easily explainable or is explainable at all at that level.
Yeah, I try not to be a fancy person. If you can't explain it on like a second grade level, it's probably not going to work at scale. And that's what I really admire from a bunch of good tools out there is they truly are that simple, but executed incredibly well. And I think that's goes a long way in our industry.
For sure. And I guess, in terms of what gets funded, I guess that's part of it, right? Is incredibly simple to explain. So simple to explain, but how or things that you like in terms of, call it defensibility, right? Like anyone can do it.
Mhm.
It's going to get competed, like crazy. What are things you look in there?
Totally. I'll borrow this phrase from another great investor. Uh, Jackie at GridCap calls it niche monopolies, and I think it's probably a term been used over time too. Is how do you find those niche monopolies about uh, like another phrase you hear from another fund is called like earned experience or earned stories. Um, has a founder found a niche that's underserved today, and whether that niche is venture backable or not, just a problem that they can then solve through that earned secret. And that is what I find creates a lot of defensibility is, do you truly understand the problem? And then when you build the tool, does it truly solve the problem? We've invested in companies that have a much more like typical view by venture investors, which is they built a massive moat, whether that's on proprietary closed loop reinforced learning AI model or data niche. But I think at the root of that is both of those started with a big problem that the founders combined with their close team of engineers put a ton of horsepower into solving a problem. And I think that that's where you kind of the moat starts. And if you race fast enough, you continue to build that moat. And look, we're pretty critical on moats, and um, I always try to think about why did it even start? Why did that moat even exist? And I think it comes back to that problem statement.
Yeah, I mean, what's a great story of something that you discovered that you were able to help along and it progressed and it's making a difference.
Um, yeah, totally. Let me give an example more on the real estate side. We have another portfolio company. It's called Phaedra. Phaedra was founded by an incredible group of human beings from the Google Energy and DeepMind technology side, plus folks that are HVAC engineers and programmers. And the problem that they have been able to address really well is saying data centers are the biggest consumer of energy for almost every utility in the United States. What customer pays me the most for my energy bill? Most utilities, not all, but most will say it's a data center, co-locator, or hyperscaler. Um, that thirst for energy is not going away, right? We're not um, turning off the taps there. So when you look at how are data centers spending their dollars on energy, part of it's to cooling and part of it's to GPU or CPU processing, right? The cooling part is the part that you have to spend to run the other. And the ratio of that is called PUE. What I found really fascinating is the niche of how do you improve PUE for assets that have already been built without ripping out physical stuff, cooling towers, heat exchangers, etc. Can you do it in software? And that's what it is an incredible business that they've built on saying, how do we run a SCADA system better? How do we operate just incrementally better every 15 minutes for existing cooling infrastructure? If I do that and you take a step back a year from now, have I dramatically reduced, e.g., 10%, 30% reduction in energy spent cooling versus processing? And they've had great results in that, anchored in data center, but expanding to some other um, district heating and cooling type of operations. And so that's kind of like maybe problem to like solution. Hopefully, is a good story.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You mentioned management teams. How do you evaluate management teams?
So for us, character is a really big part. Um, Teams that look, you all get to know each other, right? Our preference, we're typically a syndicate investor. We're typically not a lead investor, not always, but typically we don't lead. So when you don't lead, there's historically been a push to say like, great, like let me just get my check stapled to the right brand name or the right piece, right? That tends not to be our style. We love to develop relationships with founders outside of a round, help their business. I talked to a founder earlier this morning who is in between rounds considering an extension. My goal right now is how do I introduce him to a few clients? Maybe it'll work out for us to join the round, maybe not. He'll have clients. Okay. And that's a win for us. And we build a relationship in that context of how do we help them? How do they help us? And I think it's that mutual two-way street of respect and like consistency and professionalism goes a really long way to understanding the team versus just optimizing for an investment transaction. So we lean very much for the relationship side versus the transaction side for how we evaluate potential founders.
Got it.
Second bullet,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I'd offer skill set too. It's a long-winded answer, but does someone know how to build products and someone knows the industry? I think that's kind of that's the ideal combo.
Yeah, yeah. What you're saying on the other side just now was it sounds like, hey, how do we do small things together to build relationships to see how to go?
Yeah, totally. Venture investing is very similar to real estate investing, which is it's all off market. And if someone does not want to work with you, they will not work with you, right? And if they do, they will. And so we highly value a good reputation and a good working relationship. And we believe that's a two-way street on any individual company, including how you look at our fund. And so that's how we prioritize our time and how we partner with folks.
Yeah. I mean, what's a company that's doing well? Maybe they're not associated with you, but on from the outside, you like some of the things that's happening in terms of what they're serving and how they're growing.
Sure, totally. I'll give a plug for, I'll switch to a hardware one just for this. Company's called Pretread. So the founder of Pretread graduated through the HG Ventures Accelerator, which is a great organization out of Indianapolis, focused on hardware for the built environment. And what they are building is a material using crumbled rubber, so old tires that are shredded, mixed with an adhesive, a resin, to serve as an alternative to precast concrete for non-structural applications. First one is barrier wall, Jersey barrier, when you drive up and down the highway. The founder there, Eric, is an amazing person. I really enjoyed spending time with them. We visited their site, got to know them, we had a meal together, and have collaborated on how does he think about the maturity of the company, how it will scale, and he's brought quite a great degree of thought and transparency into saying, how do we go from a relatively modest size production facility, frankly R&D, early scale production, into something that scales and is looks closer to venture return. And it's that honest dialogue uh, ahead of a transaction that I think was is great. And he made the time for us, and we made the time for him. And the hope is always when you make that time for each other, you can figure out a way to work together. But the most important piece is we made the time as a team, and so maybe that's hopefully a good example of kind of that. How we start that early understanding with founder.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, what sort of specific general trends are you following? What's been interesting for you?
I think most of the viewership is in the construction space, so maybe I'll offer, if helpful, some observations in the construction. Um, at a macro level, residential in the United States has cooled, not totally stale, but like cooled compared to non-residential. Non-residential in manufacturing, heavy civil, water treatment, um, power and utility, and healthcare all have double-digit year-over-year growth, right? I think I saw a stat that manufacturing is up something between 20 and 25% from 23 to 24 for Q1. That's incredible, right? Like the United States does not have very many chunks of the economy that grow by 25% year over year. Um, so that means massive backlogs for builders in that space, both trades, material suppliers, and GCs. And it means continued price escalation and continued, I would say, requirement to get it right from a procuring side if you're an owner of one of those facilities. And so that's a big trend that we're looking at is saying where will there be tailwinds versus headwinds in how we spend money in construction for the next 36 months. My intuition is likely non-residential with continued solid opportunity for residential for things like renovation, fix and flip, and not net new build, but home improvement and quicker turn items that can navigate the high interest rate, high mortgage rate environment a little quicker, a little better.
Yeah, for sure. Um, you're involved in a lot of different things, speaking, I think boards or associations. Anything you want to highlight or bring up?
Sure, I'll throw one out there. I joined the board of an organization called Building Transformations. It's a Canadian nonprofit. Really enjoy working in Canada. I've been lucky to work primarily in the GTA, the Toronto area, for a better part of a decade, and spent a little time out west in your neck of the woods. And the reason I like Building Transformations is it's one of the few organizations that gets together both corporates and startups. So a lot kind of lean one or the other. And I really appreciate that they try to create a clearinghouse of good ideas. And I think that clearinghouse of good ideas in a very nonprofit, quasi academic sense is good. We should, as an industry, celebrate others who have good ideas, and continue to progress the space. So I'd maybe call out organization that I think is trying really hard at that, and they're early on building the cross border relationships from Canada south to the states. So excited to see where that continues to mature.
For sure. I mean, for you, what do you find, what's the difference between Canada and the US in terms of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I'll give a story from my days as a builder. I remember the first trip I had um, to um, to Ontario with my old firm, and the guy that ran the office there is like, appreciate you coming here. Like, it's a different country, it's a different culture, right? And like that was like shot number one over the bow, and I so appreciated that. Right? You're laughing because as a Canadian, you're like, man, I wish I could say that more often. It's totally true, right? It is a different culture, and I think as an American, Americans sometimes do not are not aware of that. right? Um, and what I love about the Canadian culture that I really admire is it tends to have a bit stronger, I'd say, reinforcing relationships, right? Like the Canadian economy supports itself very well. It supports even fierce competitors within the space. I find that the cross sector interaction is very good. So when I worked in Ontario, the lenders knew the builders way better than intimately versus what you see in the States between builders and lenders. It's like very different, sort of different relationships. Same with the pension funds, who were the ultimate owners of a lot of project finance assets, knew the builders better than what you might see in more publicly marketed transactions in the States. And so that anchor on relationship um, was notably different. Uh, I think that that can sell very well in big chunks of the world. That's why Canada is a massive export economy. Um, and I'm ambitious to see more and more founders able to tap into that cultural strength as they sell south of the border. It's not easy, right? Cross border work is not easy here in North America, but yeah, it's one piece that I definitely admire.
Great. Is there anything that I did not ask you, but you wanted to share?
Um, oh man, I have two kids. Hang out in Chicago. Come visit. It's a great city. My team makes fun of me because I love the city where I live so often. Like it is a great town. No, I think it's a pretty good overview. I think as background, I don't know if I gave an overview of GS Futures. So
Let's do it.
early stage, yeah, early stage venture fund, seed through Series B, check size up to 3 million, typically, and we usually are syndicate versus lead usually. We're keen anything across the built environment. So think about that from real estate development to how do you run real estate for asset management, property management? How do you design it? How do you build it? How do you finance it? So anything across that built environment space. Really keen interest on how energy and climate will interact with built environment. And we're starting to spend a lot more time with our teammates in the energy side. And then our LP is a large Korean conglomerate. It's called GS Group. So GS Group it has three lines of business: construction and real estate development, which is my primary LP focus. And we have an energy team, and then we have a retail team. And it's one of the larger conglomerates in Korea, and does work throughout Southeast Asia, as well as footprints throughout the world, Middle East, Europe, etc.